For the Washington Commanders, defeating the Philadelphia Eagles starts with stopping Saquon Barkley, but it ends with Terry McLaurin finishing it off. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com, also helping out with WUSA9.com's local coverage of the team. I am here with you every Monday through Friday. I thank you for coming through for today's episode, and everydayers out there, a special thank you to you for coming through every single day. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, in which we are going to share our X factors and predictions for this weekend's game. Washington Commanders hosting the Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to talk about maximizing Terry McLaurin against the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously trying to get a different result than we did the last time these two teams faced off. And we're going to start it off by talking about some newcomers to this rivalry that might have a major impact, including one who already had a major impact the last time these two teams met. And we're going to do that thanks to our friends over at Hillsdale College. Right now, go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. Again, that's Hillsdale College or hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Again, beating the Philadelphia Eagles for the Washington Commanders is going to start with containing running back Saquon Barkley, but I think it could end this time with Terry McLaurin trying to help finish off their NFC East division rival. First must-do of the weekend, containing Saquon Barkley. Again, every crossover Thursday, we share our three must-dos for the Washington Commanders to get a win in the weekend. Here on Fridays, I like to dive deeper into why those are the must-dos as I see them, again, entering the weekend. We're also going to take a look in this segment about Marshawn Lattimore going up against Jalen Hurts, as Marshawn, a newcomer to this rivalry, gets his first crack at the Philadelphia Eagles, unable to play in this matchup the last time. So the Washington Commanders defense, when we get to Saquon Barkley, come into this matchup ranked 28th in giving up rushing yards per play. So obviously not very good. It's really no surprise that the Washington Commanders have not been great at stopping the run this season. Now, when you look back at the New Orleans Saints matchup a week ago, the run game didn't get going as much. Obviously, Alvin Kamara had a pretty impressive impact in that game as a receiver, but as a rusher, not a whole lot to write home about. And part of the reason there is because New Orleans Saints really are kind of a one-trick pony when it comes to running the ball. They have a solid outside run game, but outside of that, they don't have a whole lot of other parts of their game going. Certainly can try to get going up in the middle of the formation, but for the most part, it's an outside run game only. And if they don't get that going, they don't really get their run game going at all. Of course, we already know that with the Philadelphia Eagles, that is not the case. The Philadelphia Eagles certainly have the ability to get their run game going on the edge. Certainly, Saquon Barkley has the ability to take it up between the tackles, and that's what makes stopping a running attack like the Philadelphia Eagles a little bit harder to defend and makes a running back like Saquon Barkley infinitely harder to defend. And with the Washington Commanders giving up 4.76 yards per carry on the season, last time these two teams faced off, they allowed Saquon Barkley overall to run for 5.6 yards per carry. That came in week 11. However, 62 of the yards that Saquon Barkley gained against the Washington Commanders, 62 of his 146, came on two carries, just two carries in the fourth quarter, critical stretch of the game, of course. And Dan Quinn, of course, talked about earlier this week about the best players in NFL history. That's what they do. They show up in the fourth quarter, they turn up in the fourth quarter, and they help their team seal the victories. And that's what Saquon Barkley did the last time these two teams met. Now, why could things be a little bit different this time? Well, for one, that was week 11. This is week 16. Yes, they've had the opportunity to get better, kind of refine what they're doing a little bit, but the Washington Commanders defense has also had that opportunity. And so we'll see if they can kind of step up a little bit more. Also, the potential of Jonathan Allen returning. He's been practicing all week. I don't have I can't give you like a 90% chance that he's going to play, 90% chance he's not going to play. But the threat that he might play is certainly significant, certainly a better run defender there in the middle than, say, a Fedarian Mathis, more probably a Carl Davis, even though Carl Davis has come in and I would say for a practice squad elevation has certainly performed admirably for what he's been asked to do. So obviously those things matter as well. And then Johnny Newton has had more experience. So if he goes back to that kind of third guy in the rotation, or however they decide to do it, again, Jonathan Allen's first game back, he could be the third guy in the rotation, maybe on a pitch count, trying not to throw him out there in the deep end right away. So we'll see how the Washington Commanders, man that front if Jonathan Allen is in fact able to go, but that certainly could have an impact here. And then of course you look at the carries before those two big ones, right? 84 yards on 24 carries. Saquon Barkley averaged 3.5 yards per carry before he got those two explosives touchdowns. That is a significantly, if you're giving up 3.5 yards to Saquon Barkley, you're not going to shake a stick at that. You're not going to be upset about that. That is the run defense of this Washington Commanders unit is looking to get to. And the presence of a guy like Marshon Lattimore is actually going to help that because it gives you a little bit more confidence on what you're doing behind the run defense. So if you need to attribute or to dedicate, I should say, a few more resources to stopping Saquon, containing Saquon, I should say, you're a little bit more confident doing that with a guy like Marshon Lattimore out there on the field. Asked Joe Witt this week in the press conference what the difference was. How were they able to keep Saquon Barkley at 3.5 yards per carry average, before those two runs happened? And Joe Witt said, quote, well, first off, I thought the guys up front played well. They hit blocks. They stayed square. We put a new front in that game they hadn't seen, so they had to adjust to it. But then, like I said, late in it, Saquon, first half, he runs for a certain number. And then second half, he's like 7 yards per carry for carrying. That's what he does. He just keeps coming. So we have to stay disciplined when it gets into the fourth quarter. We have to stay in our gaps. We have to keep coming. We have to keep pursuing confident angles, not touchdown angles to his body, because he can cut back. He can make people miss. And then, like I said, it's not just him. Their offensive line is really, really good. They block hard. They work as a unit. And so you have to give them a lot of credit for being able to move people and get up to the second level and capture people, end quote. And there's a lot of really good points that Joe Witt Jr. made in that comment or in that quote. If you go back to that Eagles game, we talked about this coming out of that loss, where one of those big touchdown runs was actually Dorrance Armstrong Jr., who was, flowing backside to the run and over pursued, got pushed out of the play. Saquon hit the backside cut, and there was nobody there to stop that run where, Dorrance Armstrong should have been. And I talked to a player on the defense about that kind of play and those kinds of things. And I don't want to isolate Dorrance Armstrong and say, oh, it was all his fault. Certainly not. And Dorrance has been really, really solid this year, but it's those one-offs, right? And against a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, against a running back like Saquon Barkley, that one time you don't hit a fit, whether it's Bobby Wagner, Frankie Lou, Dorrance Armstrong, whoever, that one time you miss your fit could be the one time that he takes advantage of it and cuts you for a 30-plus yard touchdown run, something like that. So really, really have to make sure you're focused on, yes, being aggressive, but being aggressive within the assignment and disciplined to being where you're supposed to be. Again, we mentioned that Marshon Lattimore being on the field for the first time as a Commander against the Eagles is going to be significant. Marshon Lattimore's history against Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles, 5 games overall in his career against the Eagles franchise, 2 interceptions in that career, has never intercepted Jalen Hurts. In fact, he's actually never been on the winning side of an Eagles matchup as a New Orleans Saint. I think the one time they beat the New Orleans Saints, 1 or 2 times they beat the New Orleans Saints or beat the Philadelphia Eagles while he was with the Saints, he was inactive for those games due to injury. Looking at 3 matchups, the last 3 or the 3 matchups that Lattimore has against Jalen Hurts, or against the Philadelphia Eagles, I should say, week 14, 2020, Marshon Lattimore was targeted 4 times, gave up 3 catches, 27 yards, had 1 PBU, gave up a touchdown, 132.3 passer rating. Touchdown came around 15 yards out, 5 wide, 3x2 set versus cover 0 on a back shoulder throw to Alshon Jeffrey. What stands out to me about that, A.J. Brown and Alshon Jeffrey have some similar traits. A.J. Brown clearly better than Alshon Jeffrey ever was. So if the Eagles get to around that 15-yard line of Washington's territory, don't be surprised if they try to pull back into history books and pull that out. Again, 5 wide, 3x2, back shoulder throw to the front corner of the end zone against Marshon. Week 11 of 2021, Lattimore was targeted 3 times, gave up 3 catches for 53 yards, a 118.7 passer rating. The Eagles attacked Marshon twice using screens by running other routes in front of him, right? Picks, screens, all those things to create space between he and Devontae Smith. So if Lattimore gets matched up against Devontae Smith, expect things like that to kind of come as they try to create some space between the defender and the receiver. And then finally, week 3 of 2024, this season, as a member of the New Orleans Saints, Marshon Lattimore went up against Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. He was targeted twice, gave up 1 catch for 14 yards, also had a PBU and a 72.9 passer rating. The one catch came to Devontae Smith on a scramble play. Lattimore was focused on Hurts rather and was drifting kind of in his zone. Smith came back underneath. No yak was allowed. But what you like here is that from the first time he faced Hurts to the second time to the last time, that passer rating gets lower and lower when Hurts does target Lattimore. But Jalen Hurts has shown he is willing to target Marshawn Lattimore. So Saquon Barkley, former Giant, now Eagle. Marshawn Lattimore, former Saint, now Commander. Both of these guys are going to have major impacts on what happens in this game coming up. But there are some other factors like forcing the Philadelphia Eagles into the box and getting Terry McLaurin much more open than he was the first time these two teams faced off. We'll dive deep into those factors coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks to our friends over at Prize Picks. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Prize Picks. And with Prize Picks, you can make your holidays bigger and better than ever, because Prize Picks is the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Florida, and Virginia. I live in Virginia, I can tell you, but you can use Prize Picks in Virginia. Prize Picks also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't necessarily perfect. In fact, you can double your money even if your picks don't hit completely. All of your hits don't hit. You have to hit at least some of your picks. But if you don't hit all of your picks, you can still double your money. And Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this season. Join now because the holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million during Picksmas. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL, $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup with Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by the college football playoffs. It is that time of year. College football playoffs not only back, but the college football playoff is better than ever with a newly expanded 12-team format. It's guaranteed to be bigger. It's guaranteed to be better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports' coverage of the college football playoffs begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling it against the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. So don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoffs presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Diving deeper into our 3 must-dos for the Washington Commanders to get a win over the Philadelphia Eagles here on this Friday episode. Those 3 must-dos coming from our crossover Thursday episode. Louis DiBiase of Locked On Eagles and I sat down and talked about this matchup. If you want to get even more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, all you got to do is become an insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. From there, you can text me your comments, your questions. I'm going to be sending you out information, live text during press conferences, practices, games, some inside information. Insiders got a couple of pieces of inside information just this week. And of course, you'll get access to your insider-only Zoom conferences where we get together and a bunch of people talk about what we're all interested in. And that, of course, is the success of the Washington Commanders. So again, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to try it out for free for the first 2 weeks. Getting now into our second must-do for the Washington Commanders. We've talked about this before. The Philadelphia Eagles do not like to stack the box. Vic Fangio, I don't say notorious, right? But Vic Fangio is just known for being a defensive coordinator that trusts his front. He wants to trust his front. He wants his guys to play strong and not need that extra help for that stacking the box and blitzing really brings. And against the Washington Commanders last time, they were able to do that with a very, very large amount of success. It was actually kind of impressive and confusing all at the same time. And I can tell you that this offensive line, granted, looks like Tyler Biadasz is going to be back after missing the New Orleans Saints game with an illness. Sam Cosmi has been out again. This is dropping Friday before I go to practice. We'll see if Sam Cosmi is back out of practice Friday, see if he can make it for the game. But Sam Cosmi has been sick, so everybody trying to stay healthy. And I can tell you this, like looking around the Washington Commanders locker room, they've got little like food items and supplement items and beverages and things like that to try to keep these players healthy during this season where there's the nasty illness just kind of going around. So we'll see how healthy they can be. But I can tell you that offensive line, Not happy about their performance last time they met this team. Certainly looking forward to the opportunity for a little bit of redemption and to get back and to get right. But I went through and I wanted to look, and I looked back at the Philadelphia Eagles season. I said, which teams have actually forced Vic Fangio to stack the box more than he usually does, more than he usually likes to. And it was interesting to me because the three teams I found that made him stack the box more than any were the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Carolina Panthers, and the New Orleans Saints. Now, what's interesting there, obviously, is this team has faced all three of those teams. The Washington Commanders have faced all three of those teams, so they're familiar with what they do offensively. And trying to deduce why the Philadelphia Eagles felt the need to stack the box against those teams more than others, what I actually did was I reached out to the Locked On hosts of each of those shows and asked them, and, some of these games have been a little while ago, but I asked them to kind of say, hey, can you identify for me why the team you cover was able to bring the box in a little bit more? Because, look, when I asked Cliff Kingsbury on Thursday, very specifically, do you feel a need to force Vic Fangio to want to need to stack the box? He gave me a very good answer, but at the very end of it, he said, we got to make them. So, yes, absolutely, Cliff Kingsbury wants to make the Philadelphia Eagles stack the box. So Locked On Saints host Ross Jackson came through, told me New Orleans to run for like 260 yards in their first two games. So in week 3, Philly came in with a 6-1 look, 6-man front, 1 linebacker look on defense that really was effective in limiting the Saints run games. When you line up like that, six defensive linemen, 1 linebacker, that's 7 men in the box already. All you need is 1 more lined up in there to get a stacked box. So that's what it was for the Saints. Respect for their run game coming out of the first 2 weeks of the season. Locked On Panthers host Julian Council said a lack of respect for the Carolina Panthers passing game was the reason. No need to cover deep in their options. They played everything really close, led to a lot of stacked boxes. Locked On Bucks host James Jarko said that the Bucks were expected to be a heavy run team at the time these two teams faced off, had some really good rushing games early on, while Baker Mayfield hadn't been all that consistent. So really what it basically boils down to from talking to these three hosts is that it appears defensive coordinator Vic Fangio for the Philadelphia Eagles either needs to feel no respect for your quarterback or your passing attack, or be really afraid of your ground game. Well, we know that clearly Vic Fangio respects Terry McLaurin. He put the Bermuda Triangle, 3 defenders around Terry McLaurin for the entire game last time. Clearly he respects Terry McLaurin. Clearly he respects Jaden Daniels, because if you don't respect the quarterback throwing the ball to the receiver, it doesn't matter if you respect the receiver, right? So clearly the reason Vic Fangio is not stacking the box is he doesn't fear this run game. So for the Washington Commanders to get that box sucked in, you have to establish that run game, make Vic Fangio respect that run game. That challenge goes directly on the offensive line. Of course, there's other ways you can do that, though. There are ways you can manipulate the box to kind of force defenses to play outside their comfort zone. One of the ways to do that, or two of the ways to do that, rather, use heavy sets and use reduced tight alignments from your wide receivers. That is where number 17, Terry McLaurin, is going to come in. Continue to move him around. The Washington Commanders have done a really good job the last few weeks of moving Terry McLaurin around, and there's more that they can do. Reduce those splits. Bring Terry McLaurin tighter into the formation. Motion out wide from that tight alignment. Cross motion across the formation. Use crossing routes. Make those defenders chase each other, especially against those rookie defenders who while they are physically advanced, communication can still be where you can get them. So far this season, Terry McLaurin has run a tight split route 1 time. That's an amazing number to me. That according to NFL Pro. Total Commanders wide receivers that have run tight split routes, 7, again, according to NFL Pro. Total wide receivers for the Washington Commanders that have received targets, 1. They've got 1 catch. It was a 24-yard catch. All of it was yak. That play came in week 9 against the New York Giants on a 3rd and 18 play. The Giants 42. The Commanders came out with a 3x2 empty shotgun set. De'Ami Brown was the right slot receiver, tight alignment to the formation, closest to the end of the line. Zach Ertz was in the slot. Outside of him, Noah Brown was the wide right lined up wide receiver. De'Ami chip released into the flat, makes the catch, turns upfield, breaks the tackle, gains 24 yards. That is the only, according to NFL Pro, that is the only catch this season to a wide receiver that has come out of a tight alignment. However, the tight alignment look is there. 278 of 418 pass attempts this season for the Washington Commanders. 67% have featured at least one skill position player lined up tight. Now, mostly those are tight ends, but the plays are there. The plays are in the Cliff Kingsbury playbook. So it's certainly something that is an option. It's something that we have not seen this team do a lot of. For the Philadelphia Eagles, though, they faced 15 pass attempts targeting wide receivers lined up tight. 73% of those have been completed for 162 yards. That's 14.7 yards per completion. So it can be effective against the Philadelphia Eagles defense. The biggest case study for me is Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua, who in week 12 had 9 catches for 117 yards against Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Rams did lose for other reasons, but looking at that number 1 wide receiver, 9 of Puka's routes came out of tight alignment. 6 of his targets came out of tight alignment. 5 catches, 78 yards came out of tight alignment. Only 4 catches for 39 yards came otherwise. Puka Nacua actually leads the league among wide receivers in tight alignment routes run with 32. 9 of those, 28%, came in one game against the Philadelphia Eagles. I watched all 9 routes that Puka Nacua ran from a tight alignment against the Eagles. There's a lot of motion to get Puka Nacua lined up on one place, moving him around to another place. At snap motion, force those defenders to back off at the snap because of that at snap motion, create space underneath for Terry McLaurin. Most of the success did come from the right side of the offensive alignment. Even motion from the right side to the left side, when you motion like that, it naturally forces defensive backs to kind of back off because you change the formation. You don't allow the opportunity to be communicative. The Washington Commanders have now lined up Terry McLaurin split wide left 73% of the time. When it really became an issue, that number was 76% of the time. So there has been a drop. Last week, we talked about one of the options to replacing Noah Brown was to get Terry McLaurin right and left side more than usual. He lined up wide left 56% of the time, wide right 24% of the time, in the slot on either side 20% of the time. So clearly, the Washington Commanders are doing really good work moving Terry McLaurin around. I think doing that case study of how the Rams use Puka Nacua to get him open against the Philadelphia Eagles defense can work with Terry McLaurin as well. We'll see if they employ it. I would love them to. We'll see if they actually do it. Will it result in a win? My prediction, your predictions coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by Hillsdale College. And Hillsdale says time is your most precious commodity, so they don't want you to waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. Of course, hopefully Locked On Commanders is not mind-numbing, it's mind-enriching. How can you spend your time wisely to improve yourself? Well, you can study history, economics, great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Maybe you studied these things back in school. Maybe you didn't, but even if you did, still could be a good time to get a refresher because time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed the basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. So our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, you heard that right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, and the Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. And they've even got a brand new documentary-style course if you're just interested in other forms of government, Marxism, socialism, and communism. Okay, go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, time for predictions, time for non-quarterback X factors. And you might have figured it out. My non-quarterback X factor is going to be wide receiver Terry McLaurin. I said in the beginning of today's episode that the beating the Eagles, in my opinion, is going to start with containing Saquon Barkley, is going to end with wide receiver Terry McLaurin. The Washington Commanders took a 4-point lead into the fourth quarter the last time these two teams faced off, despite the fact that Terry McLaurin finished that game with 1 catch for 10 yards. In my opinion, if Terry McLaurin finishes that game with 7 catches for even 65 yards, the Washington Commanders have a much bigger lead than 4 points. They have much more control. They force the Philadelphia Eagles to get a little bit more one-dimensional than they want to be, and I think the Washington Commanders come out with that win. Getting Terry McLaurin going, as much as you want to contain Saquon Barkley, as much as his defense has shown that for the most part they can contain Saquon Barkley, you need to get Terry McLaurin going more. Terry McLaurin could be the X factor that finishes a Washington Commanders win. Wouldn't be surprised to see maybe a last couple of minute touchdown pass to Terry to give the Washington Commanders the ultimate game-winning lead. A non-quarterback X factor for the insiders, we had a lot of options. Ultimately, apparently we see this thing the same way. Terry McLaurin came out as the insider non-quarterback X factor. But look, Johnny Newton got some love. Quan Martin got some love. Jamison Crowder was really excited to hear that. John Bates, the tight end, unfortunately, He also fell ill this week, missed practice yesterday. So we'll see if he can get back and what his status is. Good news is Zach Ertz did return to practice dealing with that concussion. We'll see how his week goes. Jeremy Chin practiced twice already this week, so he looked promising to be able to play this weekend. So promising that I made him part of my thumbnail, even though I actually don't have confirmation he's going to play. So a little bit of a roll of the dice for me, but not major, right? Tyler Biadasz got some love, and after seeing how kind of disconnected the offensive line was last week, you would expect Michael Dieter to do much better this go around from a communication standpoint, but against that Eagles defensive front, man, you want your starters. So Sam Cosmi obviously is on that list as well. Dorrance Armstrong got some love. Dante Fowler, Brian Robinson, Jaden Daniels, even though not on quarterback X factor, but I had enough say we're going to say Jaden Daniels anyway. So I appreciate the boldness. The defense as a whole got some love as well. Cliff Kingsbury got some attention there. Look, something that Cliff Kingsbury admitted this week that I think was really interesting. We talked about how much we love Joe Witt Jr.'s accountability. Is Cliff basically said he came out in that last Philadelphia Eagles game with too much. He basically was extra, and it really kind of clogged things up, and that's something that he's looking to address here in this game. Insider prediction. Very interesting. First time this has ever happened. Insider averages have come out to a tie. Washington Commanders 26, Philadelphia Eagles 26. We're a little bit split on how many insiders think the Commanders are going to win, the Eagles are going to win, but the averages, and I'm not even talking decimal points, guys. This wasn't like 26.1 Commanders, 26.3 Eagles. No, I'm talking flat 26 for the Commanders, flat 26 for the Eagles. So y'all are on a page. I'll tell you right that. My predictions this year, our record finally splits a little bit. I'm 9-5 straight up this year predicting games. I'm 8-6 against the spread because I did predict the win over the New Orleans Saints. However, I did predict that they would cover the spread. They did not, so I took an L there. Washington Commanders this weekend are plus 3.5, so they're 3.5-point underdogs at the time of this recording. The over-under is set to 45.5 total points scored. I am taking the Washington Commanders to get a win. Listen, both of these teams have losing records when they don't score more than 24 points. Both of these teams are undefeated or close to undefeated if they score more than 24 points. So clearly, this is a race to 25 points, in my opinion. I'm kind of looking at that Terry McLaurin situation. Maybe it's 24-20, waning minutes of the game. Terry McLaurin gets in the end zone. Commanders go up 27-24. That is my score prediction. Total points scored 51. So obviously, I'm looking at this going over. That is my prediction for this game. That is our conversation about this game. Next time we talk, we'll be doing it from Northwest Stadium. It's going to be like 20 degrees, y'all. So we're going to be upstairs in a radio booth. We will not be on the field. I'm sorry. It's going to be cold. That's going to be our next episode of Locked On Commanders. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you got to do is text me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders Insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommandersInsiders. Insiders, we will be having our Saturday Insider Zoom conference. So to keep a lookout for that invite coming Saturday afternoon. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL. This morning, I'm with Madman Tyler Rowland, kicking you off with a double shot of NFL Espresso. Then in the afternoon, you can come back through for the barbershop vibes with Tony Wiggins and some real NFL talk. It's the all-new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Everybody, until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.